Welcome back. According to my next guest, the truth is out there, actually up there, with our neighbor to the north, Canada. A former Canadian government official is warning we may be on the verge of intergalactic war, saying, quote, the Bush administration has finally agreed to let the military build a forward base on the moon, which will put them in a better position to keep track of the comings and goings of visitors from space, and to shoot at them if they so decide, end quote. Paul Hellyer is a former Minister of Defense and Deputy Prime Minister of the country of Canada. He joins us now from Toronto. Mr. Hellyer, thanks a lot for coming on.
Not at all. It's a pleasure.
Now, you were the Minister of Defense of Canada when you occupied that position, I believe, under Prime Minister Lester Pearson. Did you come across any classified information that suggested UFOs were real?
No, not really. We got regular reports that showed that some of them were, in fact, unidentified. Some of the sightings could not be explained as natural phenomenon, but nothing more than that.
Well, as you know, there's been this debate for years over whether or not they are real. Most people don't think they are real, or most people at least are hesitant to say they believe they're real in public. What convinced you that they do in fact exist?
Well, for the last 2 or 3 years, I've been looking at the evidence and assessing it much as, I guess, a judge would, and trying to determine who was telling the truth and who wasn't. And I finally concluded, especially after reading a book called The Day After Roswell, written by Colonel Philip Corso, that unidentifying flying objects are in fact real as the airplanes flying over your head, and that there has been a monumental cover-up for more than half a century. This is after, looking at a lot of evidence and trying to discern who was telling the truth and who wasn't, and I have concluded unequivocally that the people who claim that they have either seen UFOs or have seen classified documents about UFOs or have seen wreckage from the crash at Roswell on or about July the 4th of 1947 are the ones who are telling the truth. And consequently, I'm basing my policy considerations on that.
Where did you come across this information that the Bush administration is building a forward base on the moon? And why would they do that? And why would they keep it from the public?
Well, to answer your second question first, I don't know. That is the reason I'm raising the question.
Right. Well, how do you that's an awfully specific claim. I haven't read it in the New York Times. Doesn't mean it's not true. Doesn't mean you're wrong. But I'm interested to know why you think that.
Well, because this was forecast in Colonel Corso's book. They were wanting to build a base on the moon as far back as 1964. And General Arthur Trudeau, same name as one of my bosses, was very determined to build a forward base on the moon and prepared all of the specifications necessary for it and the blueprints and so on.
Well, what is it? Pardon me, I don't mean to interrupt you, but doesn't this make sense? I mean, if in fact there are extraterrestrials and they're buzzing our planet, why wouldn't we want to take steps to defend ourselves from them should they turn hostile?
Well, I think the critical question is whether or not they're hostile. You see, when the crash first occurred, General Nathan Twining
in Roswell
later became after that crash occurred, he declared that they were enemy alien. Now, there's no evidence that I have seen that would really convince me that they are in fact, enemy. And what I would like to know is whether that classification of enemy aliens still exists or whether it doesn't, and if it exists, what the evidence is on which the United States government bases its conclusion. I think that's tremendously important.
I think that's an entirely fair question. Now, finally, you laid out these views in September of this year at a speech at the University of Toronto, and according to the news report I have of the speech, your address, quote, ended with a standing ovation. And that implies, I think, that your views are commonplace in Canada. They're a minority view here, a distinct minority view. Do you think most Canadians believe that there is a forward base under construction on the moon and that aliens are buzzing the Earth?
No, absolutely not. Most of them are skeptics. Most of them haven't spent much time researching the subject, and so I think the average here would be very similar to the average American. And I'm hoping that maybe we can persuade the Canadian Senate to hold hearings and listen to some of the 400 witnesses that your Dr. Stephen, what's his name? Greer, Dr. Stephen Greer, has compiled and hear them and make up their minds as to whether or not there is a real threat.
All right.
And maybe this would be just enough to push the American government, the U.S. Congress or Senate, into holding its own hearings and then getting the United States government finally to come clean and tell us what they're worried about.
Okay. Canada's former Minister of Defense, Paul Hellyer. If you're right, history will record you as a visionary. If you're wrong, well, I'm glad you came on anyway. Thank you.